I'm Bruce Whitfield, Mr. You're watching RISKAfrica TV. It's so cool to go to a conference where you hear almost nothing about the company. And that tells you a very clear message. It tells you that the company is very confident in what it does and who its people are, and is confident in that they know what the company is about and what they're trying to achieve. There are a couple of presentations, update everybody, get everyone in the room. But mostly it was about broadening the minds of the participants at the conference. And so when you've got somebody like Wandile Sihlobo, who is the smartest agricultural economist in the country, pivotal in the decision-making process on land redistribution, you've got to hear him. And you've also got to calm down the people, not only in the room, but give the people in the room some tools to take back to their practices, to go talk to their customers and say, well, I was at this conference, I saw Wandile, he's not very tall, but boy, the man's got a giant intellect. And they can share the stories from Wandile. Also, when you've got somebody like Johnson A, who is going to scare any audience out of their boots because he talks about a future that none of us can comprehend, but he's also experiencing the future, and he's telling real stories about driving around in Google cars with no drivers. And the future is here. The future is now. And so that's very, very exciting. And then just fabulous speakers like Vusi Tembakwayo, who's always very, very good value. And incredible speakers. Martinus Broderick yesterday, having the courage to go up on stage and saying, you're possibly not going to like me because I'm not going to tell you the story that you traditionally hear at a conference. I'm going to tell you a story of truth. I'm going to tell you a story about my sexuality. I'm going to tell you a story about the poor kid growing up. I didn't even go to my own brother's funeral. My dad died in a shelter. I mean, this is painful stuff. But he's 34 years old. The guy is multi-millionaire. He's done incredibly well, and he's really struggled to get there, and that's very powerful. And then you get somebody like Alan Ambor, who has sold 500 million hamburgers over a 50-something year career in creating the first Spur in Dean Street in Cape Town, and really taking a risk at a time where very few people were taking risks. And you mix all of that together in the mix, and people are talking about a negative economy, and the economy is so dull, and Rudolf Buerta, who, if he wasn't so polite and well brought up, would have been using far more swear words than he did yesterday to express his exasperation at the negativity that we as South Africans all share around the Sunday braai. You bring all of these great talents together for 2 days at a conference at a place like Zimbabwe, and suddenly you can't help but leave here feeling not as terrible as when you arrived. Nothing has changed in South Africa in the last 2 days, but what hopefully has happened to the people who came to this conference over the last 2 days is they've had a shift in mindset, a shift in perspective, and just had a broadening of their minds and their perspectives so that they can then pay that forward when they go and see their clients and have conversations with people who are genuinely scared about the future. So where's my phone? My phone is over there. If I had my phone, I would take it and demonstrate to you that you're better off if you throw it away. You have to be an optimist in South Africa. You know the definition of an optimist? It's a South African who goes to a one-way street and looks both ways before crossing, because that's our natural instinct. You have to be an optimist about South Africa because there is no choice. If you are a pessimist about South Africa, then you join the brain drain, or if you're stuck in South Africa because nobody wants your skills, or you've got no passport, or you can't marry somebody with a passport, or whatever the case might be, then you are trapped in an environment, and your environment is just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. Personally, I do feel positive. I look at the huge positives that have happened in South Africa in the last 18 months. We got rid of a kleptocrat. We got rid of an enabler of kleptocracy. The vast majority of the new cabinet is a new cabinet. I think there are 5 ministers or deputy ministers who were in the Zuma administration. There's been a huge turnover of people within the Hawks. We've got a new head of the MPA. We've got a new head of SARS. We've got a new head of the Public Investment Corporation. We've got new heads who've been put in place under massively adversarial circumstances. If you live in social media world, you are going to be a depressed person. Because social media world, and much to Julius Malema's chagrin, is not the real world. If social media world was the real world, the EFF would have won 80% of the votes. We would have land redistribution without compensation. Everybody would have free Gucci shoes and Louis Vuitton handbags, and you would have to carry them at all times as a badge of honor and freedom. I mean, thank goodness we don't live in that world. We live in a real world which is deeply unfair, it's deeply unequal, which needs dramatic action. And that dramatic action, as Vusi Tembakwayo said this morning, is not going to come from government. It's not going to come with Cyril Ramaphosa putting on a fairy outfit and waving a magic wand. That's not. It's only going to come from South Africans who say, right now is the time that I'm prepared to take risk. Right now is the time that I'm prepared to create a job, create an opportunity. Marnus has gone to his network and said, let's create 30 jobs in a month. Let's try this. He's created 200. Small steps in a sea of 10 million people who are unemployed, and half of whom may be unemployable. That's absolutely critical. We don't achieve a positive future for South Africa by navel gazing and getting caught up in the daily and cheapers. 57 murders out of 100,000 people in South Africa is a travesty, is an absolute travesty. But we measure these things, and if you can't measure it, you can't fix it. So we know where the vast majority of crimes happen. We know that the vast majority of murders, 70% of murders happen between 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and midnight on a Sunday night. And they happen predominantly in 30 policing areas. So you've got a very good idea how to quite dramatically reduce the crime rate if you target it properly. Yeah. We've got the tools, we've got the mechanisms, we've got goodwill. There is surprisingly money in the country, even though we're stumbling along and we're not really growing. There is a huge amount of opportunity. Every single founder of a business in South Africa that I have ever spoken to speaks about the opportunity. Just to leave you with one last thought. In my kids' music room at school, I stole this, because I'm from South Africa and I appropriate other people's things. And I didn't compensate for this at all. But there's a sign in my kids' music room that says, "Dear optimists, pessimists and realists." And you know those people, don't you? I'm an optimist, but, I'm really not a pessimist, but, or, I'm actually a realist, but. Anybody who says but in the middle of a sentence, ignore the first part of the sentence. What they really mean is the second part of the sentence. I'm not a racist, but. Those people, those people. So, dear optimists, pessimists and realists, while you were arguing about the level of the glass of water, I drank it. Regards, the opportunist. And if you want problems, welcome to South Africa 2020, because that's where we're headed, to a place with problems that are coming out of our ears. But it's a great place for problem solvers. It's a great place for people who want to make a difference in South Africa, and you could do that for profit. Capitec came into existence not because South Africa needed another bank. We had banks, but they saw the opportunity in South Africa where banks were not lending predominantly to poor black people because they said there was too much risk. So Capitec managed the risk, saw the opportunity, and now has more than 10 million customers. It is about the opportunity, and has made PSG, which is the major shareholder in Capitec, possibly the best performing company on any stock market in the world over the past quarter of a century. If it's not the top one, it's got to be up there amongst some of the best performers in the world. Extraordinary growth out of a country that people write off consistently, and mostly South Africans write off consistently, as a basket case. So do I share Rudolf Botha's optimism? In a word, yes. What are you selling as somebody who's selling insurance? Are you selling risk cover? Are you selling optimism? No, you're selling a product that nobody wants to buy. Nobody wants to buy insurance. You've almost got to hold people down, put your knee on their chest and force them to sign a piece of paper, or at least give them your thumbprint, or however you're going to be doing it into the future. It's a hard sell. You have to your advantage a terrifying environment, an environment in which people do need protections from violence and from death and mayhem and destruction. Can I challenge you, though, to not sell it on that basis? Because I was uninsured for many, many years until I finally found an advisor that sold me optimism and didn't sell me death and destruction and mayhem. And when a mechanic opens the car bonnet and goes, "Don't be that insurance guy. Say, you know what, this is a dangerous place, but this is the sort of thing that you can do. And don't over-insure yourself. Invest in growth, invest in opportunity. Sell the upside of growth. Understand that South Africa is not the basket case. That you may believe it is, and if you do believe it is, you're going to be rubbish at selling into a South African environment. You have to be an optimist, I'm afraid. And if you can't be an optimist, then find another job. Because your job is to, yes, de-risk people's lives, but at the same time, your job is to convince people about a better future than they can imagine as possible. South Africa, for decades, has been written off by people who've gone after 1961 in Sharpeville, and the Rivonia trial in 64, and 1976 and the student uprisings, and 1985 and P.W. Botha and states of emergency and civil war, and 89 to 1994 with the deep uncertainty of unbanning of political parties, and I can carry on and on. Chris Harney's assassination in 1992. We went to the brink of civil war. We went to the brink of self-destruction, and people wrote us off. We wrote ourselves off in 2008 when we ran out of electricity. We then, of course, pulled ourselves back from the brink in 2010. We held a wonderful World Cup, and then we went back into the abyss of mayhem and self-doubt. 2020's got to be a better year than 2019. 2019 was, believe it or not, it doesn't feel like it, does it? But it was a better year than 2018. Do you know why? We're getting further and further away from the lost decade. And there is a gradual process of building a future for South Africa. And you can either be part of the solution or you're part of the problem. You choose. I'm going to judge. Yes, I will judge you. Be a part of the solution.